They abandoned their mother in the rain. Her revenge started at the funeral. The rain had not stopped since morning. It fell over the church roof in silver sheets, ran down the stained glass windows, and gathered in dark puddles along the front steps of New Hope Baptist Church. Every few seconds, thunder rolled somewhere in the distance, low and tired, like the sky itself had come to mourn. Inside the church, the pews were full. Women dressed in black dabbed at their eyes with folded tissues. Elderly men sat quietly with their hats resting on their knees. The choir stood near the pulpit, robes pressed and still, waiting for the pastor to give the signal. At the front of the sanctuary, surrounded by white lilies and pale blue roses, rested the closed casket of Mrs. Bernice Whitaker. Everybody in that church knew Bernice. Some knew her as Sister Bernice. Some called her Mother Whitaker. Some remembered the way she cooked for families who had no food, prayed for children who had lost their way, and gave money she could not afford to give. She had been the kind of woman who helped quietly, loved deeply, and suffered without making her pain everybody else's burden. But on that rainy Saturday morning, the people sitting closest to her casket were the same people who had hurt her the most. Her children. Marcus Whitaker, the oldest, sat in the front row wearing an expensive dark suit and a face carved out of stone. He kept his hands folded, his eyes forward, and his grief carefully controlled. Beside him sat Denise, his younger sister, dressed in black lace with pearls around her neck. She dabbed at her eyes, but every now and then, she glanced around the church to see who was watching. On the other side sat Calvin, the youngest, holding a Bible in his lap. His head was bowed, his lips moving silently, as though prayer could cover everything memory refused to forget. To the people who did not know the full story, they looked like grieving children. But grief has a sound. And what sat on that front pew was too quiet, too polished, too prepared. 2 rows behind them sat Tasha Bell, her hands clenched around a damp tissue. She was not Bernice's blood. She had no legal claim to the family name. But she had been the one bringing groceries when the children were too busy. She had been the one checking on Bernice when the phone did not ring. She had been the one who came running the night Bernice was left alone in the rain. Tasha knew what most people in that church did not. She knew that the funeral was not going to end the way Marcus, Denise, and Calvin expected. Because Bernice Whitaker had been quiet in life. But she had not died silent. Pastor Monroe stepped slowly to the pulpit and opened his Bible.
We are gathered here today to honor the life of Sister Bernice Elaine Whitaker, a mother, a woman of faith, a servant of this community. She touched so many lives with her kindness and unwavering faith. Her gentle spirit and dedication to serving others will forever be remembered in this community.
A soft amen moved through the church. Then the side door opened. Every head turned. Attorney Raymond Ellis walked in wearing a black coat, carrying a leather folder in one hand and a sealed blue envelope in the other. Rainwater dripped from the edge of his umbrella as he made his way down the center aisle.
Why is he here now? What is he doing here all of a sudden? Now is not the time.
I don't know, Denise. But we can't ignore this right now.
This is too much. Everything is already so heavy today.
Pastor Monroe, Mrs. Whitaker left specific instructions for today's service. Instructions? Yes. She requested that before any song is sung, before any eulogy is given, and before anyone stands in this church to speak kindly over her body. She requested that before any song is sung, before any eulogy is given. Before anyone speaks kindly? What could that possibly mean?
He paused. The rain struck harder against the windows. Attorney Ellis turned his eyes toward the front pew, where Bernice's children sat frozen.
She requested that the truth be heard first.
Now hold on, this is our mother's funeral.
Yes, Mr. Whitaker, that is exactly why she chose this moment. Your mother was very specific in her instructions, Mr. Whitaker.
Instructions? This is supposed to be a time to honor her, not air secrets?
The church fell silent. And in that silence, everyone could feel it. Something buried was about to rise. Something hidden was about to speak. And the woman in the casket, the mother they thought they had left powerless, had come to her own funeral with one final message. Her revenge had begun. But to understand why Bernice Whitaker would leave such instructions, you have to go back. Back before the casket. Back before the rain-soaked bus stop. Back to the beginning of a life spent giving everything to people who eventually forgot to give anything back. 32 years earlier, Bernice was a young widow standing in the doorway of a small house on Willow Street, watching a hearse carry her husband away. James Whitaker had been a good man, a hard-working man, the kind of man who fixed what was broken and never complained about the weight of it. When his heart gave out on a Tuesday afternoon at the factory, Bernice was left with 3 children under the age of 10 and a mortgage she did not know how she would pay. She did not have time to fall apart. Grief, for a mother with children to feed, is a luxury that gets postponed. Bernice took a job at the textile plant during the day and cleaned offices at night. She learned to stretch a pound of ground meat across 3 meals. She patched Marcus's school pants instead of buying new ones. She sold the wedding ring James had given her, not because she stopped loving him, but because Denise needed shoes and Calvin needed a coat for the winter. She never told her children how close they came to losing the house. She never told them about the nights she skipped dinner so there would be enough for them. She never told them how many times she cried quietly in the bathroom with the water running so they would not hear her. She believed, in the way that loving mothers often believe, that her silence was a kind of protection. She thought that if her children never knew the true cost of their comfort, they would grow up lighter, freer, and unburdened by guilt. What she did not understand, not then, was that a child who never sees the sacrifice will never learn to honor it. Marcus grew up sharp and ambitious, determined never to be poor the way his mother had been poor. But somewhere between his hunger to succeed and his fear of failing, he began to see people, even his own mother, as instruments. Useful. Or not useful. Denise grew up beautiful and restless, always aware of the girls at school who had more, whose mothers drove nicer cars and wore nicer clothes. She loved her mother, but she was ashamed of her, ashamed of Willow Street, and ashamed of the sound of Bernice's laughter, which she found too loud, too country, and too much a reminder of where she came from. Calvin grew up soft-spoken and clever, learning early that a Bible verse and a gentle smile could excuse almost anything. He was the one who called Bernice Mema, the sweetest, and the one who took the most from her without ever quite noticing he was taking. By the time they were grown, with homes and careers and children of their own, Marcus, Denise, and Calvin had built lives far away from Willow Street, in every sense that mattered. They visited on holidays. They called when they needed something. And they had, without ever admitting it to themselves, begun to see their mothers love the way a person sees a well that never runs dry, something you draw from and never think to fill back up. Bernice noticed the change long before she said anything about it. She noticed that Marcus's calls always came right before he needed a favor. She noticed that Denise only visited when there was a family photo to take for social media, something to prove that she still had a mother and still had roots, without ever asking Bernice how she was really doing. She noticed that Calvin prayed over her dinner table and then left with a check tucked into his jacket pocket, one he had asked for so smoothly she almost forgot she had been the one to offer it. Still, Bernice kept hoping. She told herself that children get busy. She told herself that they still loved her, deep down, the way she loved them. She told herself that one day, when they were older, they would remember. But some things a person cannot hope their way through. The house on Willow Street became the center of it all. To Bernice, that house was not 4 walls and a roof. It was the place where James had laid the foundation with his own 2 hands. It was the room where Marcus took his first steps, the kitchen where Denise learned to bake her grandmother's sweet potato pie, and the porch where Calvin used to sit with his mother on summer evenings, asking her questions about God and life that she did her best to answer. To her children, grown and grasping, the house on Willow Street had become something else entirely. It had become money. Marcus's construction business was drowning in debt, more than he had ever told his mother, more than he had told his own wife. He needed capital, and fast, and the house Bernice refused to sell sat on land that had tripled in value since James first built on it. Denise, meanwhile, had convinced herself that if her mother would just downsize, just take a smaller place, the family could finally split the difference and she could pay off the credit card debt she was too proud to admit she carried. And Calvin, always the quiet operator, had already begun speaking to a real estate contact about what the property might fetch if it ever came up for sale. None of them said this plainly to Bernice. Instead, they wrapped their greed in the language of concern.
Mama, this house is too much for you to keep up alone. Let us do something about it.
Mama, you could be somewhere safer, somewhere smaller, somewhere easier.
Mama, don't you think it's time to let go?
This house isn't just wood and brick. It's your daddy's hands. It's your daddy's hands. It's where I raised you. I am not selling it while I still have breath in my body.
We just worry about you, Mama, that's all.
They did not know that the house held more than memories. Buried beneath the floorboards of sentiment was a truth Bernice had never spoken aloud, a secret tied to the land, to money James had quietly saved before he died, money Bernice had protected and grown in silence for over 3 decades. Her children were fighting over a house. They had no idea they were fighting over far more than that. While her own children drifted further away, one young woman kept drawing closer. Tasha Bell had grown up 2 houses down from Bernice, the daughter of a woman named Loretta who worked 2 jobs just like Bernice once had. When Loretta passed suddenly from a stroke, 17-year-old Tasha found herself alone, with no father in the picture and no family willing to take her in. Bernice never made it official. There was no adoption paperwork, no legal document declaring Tasha her daughter. But there was something stronger than paper. There was a presence. Bernice showed up. She helped Tasha finish high school. She sat with her at her mother's funeral when no one else came. She taught her to cook, to pray, and to stand up straight even when the world was trying to bend her small. And as the years passed and Bernice grew older, Tasha began showing up in return. She was the one who called every single morning just to hear Bernice's voice. She was the one who drove 2 hours on weekends to fix a leaking faucet or replace a burnt-out porch light. She was the one who sat with Bernice on quiet evenings, listening to stories about James, about the early years, about the ache of raising children who no longer called just to talk. "You are the daughter my heart chose," Bernice told her one evening, squeezing her hand. Marcus, Denise, and Calvin noticed Tasha's closeness to their mother, and it did not sit well with them. Not because they wanted to be closer to Bernice themselves, but because Tasha's presence was a mirror, and none of them liked what they saw reflected back.
She's not even family. Why is she always around? I was just helping. She's always here, like she belongs.
Maybe because she's the only one who is.
She's family to me. I was just trying to help her. I don't mean any harm.
She's right, Denise. Mom needs her here.
This is ridiculous. She's not blood.
With a rare flash of honesty even he seemed surprised by, because she's the only one who is. The tension simmered for months, unspoken, building like pressure behind a dam. And then came the night that broke everything open. It happened on a Thursday in late autumn, when the sky had already turned the color of wet concrete by 4 in the afternoon. Marcus called Bernice and told her the 3 of them wanted to take her to dinner, a family dinner, just the 4 of them, to celebrate her birthday a little early. Bernice's heart lifted at the invitation. She had not had a real dinner with all 3 of her children in over a year. She put on her good blue dress, the one James used to say brought out her eyes, and she waited on the porch until Marcus's car pulled up. But there was no restaurant. Marcus drove instead to a law office downtown, one Bernice did not recognize, where a man she had never met sat behind a desk with a folder of documents already prepared.
What is this?
Mama, just hear us out. This is a power of attorney. It gives me the ability to manage the house, the finances, all of it, so you don't have to worry about any of the stress anymore.
You mean so you can sell it?
Mama, I would never do that to you. This is about protecting you and making sure the house stays in the family. Please, just read it over with us.
It's not about selling. It's about protecting you.
Protecting me from what? From my own home? From the only thing your father left standing? Protecting me from what? From my own home? From the only thing your father left standing?
Mom, the neighborhood has changed. We need to protect the legacy, not risk losing it entirely.
Mama, the Lord wants us to be good stewards. This house is a burden you don't need to carry anymore. Let us carry it for you.
No, I will not sign this. Not today. Never. This is wrong. Please don't make me do this.
The ride back was silent, thick with a tension none of them dared to name. Rain had begun to fall, gentle at first, then harder, drumming against the windscreen as Marcus gripped the steering wheel.
You always do this. You always make everything difficult.
I raised you. I am not difficult. I am careful. There's a difference.
You're selfish. You sit in that big house all alone and you won't even let us help.
Help, is that what you call this? Dragging me to a lawyer's office under a lie? Raised you. I am not difficult. I am careful. There's a difference.
You're selfish. You still know.
You sit in that big house all alone and you won't even a lawyer's office under a lie?
Calvin said nothing at all. He simply stared out the window, watching the rain streak sideways across the glass. The storm grew heavier as they reached the edge of town, near an old bus shelter on Route 9, the metal roof rattling under the weight of the downpour. Marcus's jaw clenched. Something in him, some ugly frustration he had been carrying far longer than that single night, rose to the surface all at once.
Get out!
What did you say to me?
You want to be so independent, so stubborn about that house? Fine, find your own way home.
Marcus, it is pouring rain.
Get out, Mama.
You want to be so independent, so stubborn about that house? Fine. Find your own way home.
Marcus, it is pouring rain.
Get out, Yada, Mama.
Marcus, it is pouring rain. Get out, Mama. Denise said nothing. Calvin said nothing. The silence from the back seat was its own kind of cruelty, louder in some ways than Marcus's words. Bernice sat there for a long moment, waiting for someone, anyone, to say this was a joke, to say they were sorry, to say they did not mean it. No one did. With trembling hands, she opened the car door and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit her instantly, soaking through her good blue dress, the one James used to say brought out her eyes. She turned back once, hoping to see the car still waiting. Instead, she watched the taillights pull away into the darkness, leaving her alone at the edge of the road, in the cold, in the rain, with nowhere to go. Bernice Whitaker, 68 years old, a woman who had given every single thing she had to 3 children who now would not even stop the car, sat down on the small metal bench beneath the flooding bus shelter and wept. She did not know how long she sat there. Time loses its shape when a person is that broken. It might have been 20 minutes. It might have been an hour. The rain came down without mercy, and the wind cut through the thin fabric of her dress, and still, she sat, too stunned, too heartbroken, too tired to move. It was Tasha who found her. She had been driving home from a late shift, taking the back road along Route 9 out of habit, when her headlights swept across the shelter and caught the outline of a woman hunched over on the bench. Something in Tasha's chest seized before her mind even fully registered who it was. She pulled over so fast she nearly skidded on the wet asphalt. Mama Bernice. Tasha ran through the rain, her shoes filling with water, and dropped to her knees in front of the shelter. Bernice looked up, her face soaked. Whether from rain or tears it was impossible to tell, and something in her broke open even further at the sight of Tasha's face. Baby, what happened? Who did this to you? Bernice could not answer at first. She only shook her head, her body trembling from cold and grief in equal measure. Tasha wrapped her coat around Bernice's shoulders and helped her into the car, turning the heat up as high as it would go, driving straight to her own small apartment instead of asking a single question Bernice was not ready to answer. She ran a hot bath. She found dry clothes. She made tea with honey, the way Bernice always made it for her when she was a girl. And she sat beside her on the couch, Bernice's cold hands wrapped inside her own, and waited. It was near midnight when Bernice finally spoke.
They left me. I can't believe my children left me.
Mama Bernice, please stop crying. I just feel so alone. I'm here with you. You are not alone tonight, and you will never be alone again, not as long as I'm breathing.
30 years, Tasha. 30 years of going hungry so they'd eat fur.
You don't have to carry their weight anymore, Miss Bernice.
I see you, Miss Bernice. All those years of sacrifice. Then let me carry some of it now. You don't have to be strong all by yourself anymore. Marcus told me to get out of the car. In this rain, Denise just sat there in the back seat. And Calvin looked out the window like my pain was just scenery passing by.
Oh, Mama Bernice.
But you ran through the storm for me.
By morning, things are going to change.
I am done protecting them from the truth of what they've become. By morning, things are going to change. I am done protecting them from the truth of what they've become.
Mama.
Bernice looked at her, this young woman who shed none of her blood and all of her heart, and something shifted permanently inside her that night. The tears did not stop right away, but underneath them, something else was rising. Not anger, exactly. Something steadier than anger. Something closer to clarity. She thought of 30 years of sacrifice. 30 years of hunger quietly endured so her children could eat first. 30 years of silence about the cost of raising them, because she believed silence was love. She thought of Marcus's cold voice telling her to get out of the car. She thought of Denise's silence in the back seat. She thought of Calvin staring out the window as though his mother's suffering was simply scenery. And she thought of Tasha, headlights cutting through the storm, running through the rain without a second's hesitation. By morning, Bernice Whitaker had made a decision. She would no longer spend what remained of her life protecting her children from the truth of what they had become. The following Monday, Bernice called attorney Raymond Ellis, the same lawyer who had helped James set up the small trust decades earlier, the man who had watched Bernice raise 3 children largely on her own and never once asked for more than his modest fee.
Need to change my will, all of it. And I need your help with something else too, something bigger.
Whatever you need, Bernice. You've raised those three largely on your own, and I've watched you do it. What are we doing with the estate?
I want to leave everything to my granddaughter, Lena. The boys have their own past and help me, but Lena.
You know, why don't you say, Bernice, sister in your ironclad? Tell me about the other matter, the bigger one.
Here are the records. The business loan Marcus never repaid. The money Denise still owes for her wedding. The funds Calvin took for his church initiatives that never saw the light of day. I want it all documented.
And the house on Willow Street, the savings?
All of it.
Everything, Mr. Rahman. I want every last cent accounted for.
This could tear the family apart.
It already has.
We are starting a foundation, the Bernice Whitaker Foundation. It will provide housing and support for elderly women who have been abandoned by their own families.
Left the way I was left. Who will run it?
Tasha Bell. She's going to be the director. I want to give these women the one thing my children tried to deny me: dignity.
I understand, Mama Bernice. Tasha Bell has the vision and the strength to lead this.
Exactly. This is about restoring what was taken from us.
Over the following weeks, Bernice worked with quiet determination. She gathered old bank statements showing exactly how much money she had given each of her children over the years. Money for Marcus's first business loan he never fully repaid, money for Denise's wedding she still owed on, and money for Calvin's church initiatives that never seemed to reach the people they were intended for. She pulled together photographs, records, and proof of a lifetime spent giving. She sat in front of a small camera Attorney Ellis helped her set up in her living room, the same living room where she had rocked all three of her children to sleep as infants, and she recorded a message.
To my children, this isn't built from bitterness. I am not trying to destroy you. I am trying to force you one final time to see clearly.
Her plan was not built from bitterness. Bernice made sure of that. She was not trying to destroy her children. She was trying to force them, one final time, to see clearly. She invited them to dinner one last Sunday, cooking the same meal she used to make every week when they were small: cornbread, greens, and smothered chicken. The smell of it filling the house on Willow Street the way it used to when James was still alive and the children were still young enough to believe their mother was the center of the world. She watched them carefully throughout that final meal, giving each of them, in her heart, one last quiet chance to simply say they were sorry.
Mama, this chicken is as good as always. Mama, look, we've been thinking. Maybe we came on too strong the other night about the house.
It's all right, boys. We'll figure it out together.
We just want what's best for you, you know?
Do any of you remember the night it rained?
Mama, we already talked about that. We were all stressed. It was a heavy moment. You know we didn't mean anything by it.
I sat in the rain for over an hour, alone, at my age, because my own son told me to get out of a moving car.
The car wasn't moving, Mama. We were parked.
You left me there alone.
You're being dramatic. It's not like we left you in the middle of a highway.
Calvin lowered his eyes to his plate and said nothing at all. Bernice looked at each of them in turn, searching their faces for even the smallest flicker of true remorse, and found instead the same thing she had been finding for years: excuses dressed up as explanations and defense dressed up as love. By the time dessert was cleared from the table, Bernice already knew. They were not sorry for what they had done. They were only afraid of what it might cost them. In the weeks that followed, Bernice's health began to fail quietly, the way a candle burns lowest right before it goes out. She did not tell her children how tired she had grown. She spent her remaining time instead with the people who had shown up for her without being asked. Long afternoons with Tasha, sorting through old photographs and letters, and quiet evenings with Pastor Monroe, talking through scripture and forgiveness and the particular ache of loving people who do not love you back the same way. Do you forgive them? Pastor Monroe asked her once, near the end. Bernice thought about the question for a long time before answering. I forgive them, she said finally. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. Forgiveness means I won't let what they did poison what's left of my life. It doesn't mean I owe them my silence too. She passed away on a quiet Tuesday morning in November, in her own bed, in the house on Willow Street, with Tasha holding one hand and Pastor Monroe praying softly at her side. Her children were not there. They had not visited in weeks. Marcus was in the middle of a business trip. Denise had a hair appointment she did not want to reschedule. Calvin had told himself he would visit that weekend. Bernice Whitaker died surrounded not by the children she had given everything to, but by the people who had given something back. Which brings us to the rain-soaked Saturday morning where this story began, to New Hope Baptist Church, to a closed casket surrounded by white lilies, and to Attorney Raymond Ellis standing at the front of the sanctuary with a sealed blue envelope in his hand. She requested that the truth be heard first, Ellis had said. And now, with the entire church holding its breath, he opened the envelope and withdrew a small tablet. He set it on a stand beside the casket and pressed play. The screen flickered to life, and there was Bernice, sitting in her own living room, wearing a soft gray cardigan, her hands folded calmly in her lap the way they always were. A collective gasp moved through the church at the sight of her face, alive and steady, speaking from beyond the grave. "If you are watching this," Bernice began, her voice warm but firm, "then I have already gone home to be with my Lord, and with James, who I have missed every single day for 32 years. She paused, and even through the screen, her eyes seemed to search the pews, to land, deliberately, on the front row. "Marcus. Denise. Calvin. I loved you with everything I had. I worked myself to the bone so you would never know hunger the way I knew it. I gave up my own comfort so you could have comfort of your own. And I never once asked you to thank me for it, because I believed that was what love was supposed to look like." Marcus's jaw tightened. Denise's hand flew to her mouth. Calvin stared at the screen, unmoving. "But love is not supposed to be one-sided forever," Bernice continued. "And I want the people in this church, the people who have known me for years, to understand something about the night it rained." A hush fell so deep over the sanctuary that the only sound was the storm outside, still beating steadily against the stained glass. "My children took me to a lawyer's office under a lie to pressure me into signing away my home. When I refused, they left me on the side of the road, in a storm, at nearly 70 years old, and drove away." Gasps rippled through the pews. Several women in the congregation covered their mouths. An elderly man shook his head slowly, his hat still resting on his knee. "I sat in that bus shelter for over an hour," Bernice's recorded voice continued, steady and unwavering. "Cold. Alone. Wondering what I had done wrong to raise children who could do such a thing to their own mother. It was not one of my children who found me that night. It was a young woman I helped raise but never legally called my own. Tasha Bell drove me home, warmed my hands, and stayed with me through the night." Every eye in the church turned toward Tasha, sitting quietly in the second row, tears streaming freely down her face. "That night taught me something I should have learned many years earlier," Bernice said. "Family is not always the blood in your veins. Sometimes family is the person who shows up when the ones who share your name do not." Marcus's face had gone pale. Denise was openly crying now, though whether from grief or shame, it was hard to say. Calvin sat frozen, his Bible still resting untouched in his lap. "I do not share these things to shame my children in front of God and everybody," Bernice said gently. "I share them because silence protected them their entire lives, and silence is exactly what allowed this to happen. I am done protecting people from the truth of their own choices." She took a slow breath before continuing. "Attorney Ellis will explain everything else. But I want my children to hear this from me, one last time, while my voice can still reach them. I loved you every single day of your life, even on the day you left me in the rain. But love and consequences are not opposites. They can live in the same house." The video ended. The screen went dark. For a long moment, nobody in the church moved. Then Attorney Ellis stepped forward, clearing his throat gently, and opened the leather folder he had carried in with him. "Mrs. Whitaker's estate," he began, "consists of the property on Willow Street, valued now at just under $1.2 million given the recent commercial development in the area, along with savings and investments accumulated by her late husband, James, and grown carefully over the past 3 decades, totaling an additional $600,000. A murmur of shock swept the pews. Even Marcus's eyes widened. He had spent years believing his mother's house was worth a fraction of that, believing there was little of real value beyond the land itself. "None of these assets," Ellis continued, "have been left to Marcus, Denise, or Calvin Whitaker." The words landed like thunder. Every asset has instead been placed into the newly established Bernice Whitaker Homecoming Foundation, created to provide housing, dignity, and support for elderly women abandoned or neglected by their own families. Tasha Bell has been named as its director, effective immediately. Denise let out a small, broken sound. Marcus stood up fully now, his face flushed with disbelief. "This can't be legal," he said. "She wasn't in her right mind." Mrs. Whitaker was examined by 2 independent physicians before finalizing these documents, Ellis replied evenly. Both confirmed she was of sound mind and clear intention. I have the documentation here, should you wish to review it. Marcus sat back down slowly, the fight draining out of him, replaced by something heavier. Attorney Ellis then withdrew 3 smaller envelopes, each labeled with a name in Bernice's careful handwriting: Marcus, Denise, and Calvin. Your mother left each of you a personal letter, he said, stepping forward to place them, one at a time, into their hands. Marcus opened his slowly. Inside were not just a letter but copies of records, dates, and amounts, a careful accounting of every dollar Bernice had given him over the years for his business, money he had told himself he would repay someday, money he had never once fully returned. Denise's envelope held receipts as well, quieter ones, records of tuition payments, wedding contributions, and money sent during hard months she had never openly admitted to needing, all of it given freely by a mother she had spent years being ashamed of. Calvin's envelope was the heaviest of all. Inside were records of donations he had solicited in his mother's name for church initiatives that, Bernice's notes made clear, she had personally verified never fully reached their intended recipients. Attached was a short, handwritten line in Bernice's careful script. I loved you enough to stay quiet about this for years. I love you enough now to finally speak. Each of them read in silence, the church watching, the rain still falling steadily outside, as 3 grown adults confronted, for the first time in their lives, an unfiltered account of who they had truly become. Attorney Ellis let the silence stretch before speaking again. Your mother also left one final provision, he said. Should any of you wish to be reinstated into her legacy in any capacity, the path remains open. It requires a public acknowledgement of what occurred, full repayment of the funds documented in your letters, and a period of service at the care home to be established in her name. The choice, entirely, is yours. Marcus stared down at the letter in his hands, his jaw working, saying nothing. Denise wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing the careful makeup she had applied that morning. Calvin closed his eyes, his lips finally moving again, though this time it did not look like performance. It looked like something closer to prayer. Pastor Monroe stepped forward gently to close the service, his voice soft with the particular sorrow of a man who had watched this entire story unfold from the front pew of his own church for years. Let us not leave this place in anger, he said quietly, but let us leave it changed. Sister Bernice gave her whole life in love. Let her final gift be the truth that helps somebody in this room become better than they were yesterday. When the service finally ended, the rain had softened into a light drizzle. Mourners filed out slowly, some shaking their heads, some wiping fresh tears, all of them changed in some quiet way by what they had witnessed. Marcus, Denise, and Calvin stepped outside together, standing beneath the church awning, none of them speaking, none of them quite able to meet each other's eyes. For the first time in their adult lives, they understood, fully and completely, what it had felt like for their mother to stand alone in weather like this, abandoned by the people who were supposed to love her most. The rain that had once left Bernice stranded now simply fell around her children, quiet and indifferent, as they stood with envelopes in their hands and a lifetime of unpaid debts finally coming due. Tasha stepped out last, an umbrella in one hand and a small brass key in the other, the key to the house on Willow Street. She looked at Marcus, Denise, and Calvin for a long moment, not with triumph, not with cruelty, but with something closer to sorrow for what they had lost and what they still had a chance to become. She loved you, Tasha said simply. Right up until the very end. That's the part one hope you never forget. Then she turned and walked toward her car, toward the house that would soon become a place of shelter for women who had nowhere else to turn, carrying forward the love that Bernice Whitaker had given so freely and, in the end, had finally learned to protect. The story of Bernice Whitaker did not end in bitterness. It ended in truth, in accountability, and in the quiet, powerful lesson she left behind for everyone who heard it. Family is not always who carries your name. Family is who carries you when the rain comes.